Great job finishing the first 3 passages of test number 2. We are continuing to build on our skills, and we're going to do so by attempting the next passage, which is passage 4. This passage is what's known as a historical document, and many students have told me that this is their least favorite type of passage, mainly because it uses some pretty old language and it's highly complex in its structure. But since we have to deal with this, we want to continue practicing, and you only get better through practice. So the more of these types of passages we put in front of us, the better off we will be and the more confident we will be going into this exam. So when you're answering these questions, you want to make sure that you're annotating quite well. Because these passages are pretty hard to get through, we should annotate every few lines. And in the event that we can't annotate just a few lines, we want to at least summarize what's being said in each passage. As you can see, this is a pretty long passage. It has 85 lines. So yes, we will be using the chunking method. And I think it would be a good thing to stop right around 60. So we can answer all the questions we can using those 60 lines. Then come back, read the rest of it, and finish the passage. So without further ado, let's just read the excerpt, and then we'll dive right in. I urge the 16th Amendment because manhood suffrage, or man's government, is civil, religious, and social disorganization. The male element is a destructive force, stern, selfish, aggrandizing, loving war, violence, conquest, acquisition, breeding in the material and moral world alike discord, disorder, disease, and death. See what a record of blood and cruelty the pages of history reveal. Through what slavery, slaughter, and sacrifice, through what inquisitions and imprisonments, pains and persecutions, black codes and gloomy creeds, the soul of humanity has struggled for the centuries, while mercy has veiled her face and all hearts have been dead alike to love and hope. There's a lot being said here, but it's all similar. And the main idea here is that men, or rather a man-dominated government, has brought a lot of pain and destruction. So we can just annotate this as man, pain, destruction. Let's read on from line 15. The male element has held high carnival thus far. It has fairly run riot from the beginning, overpowering the feminine element everywhere, crushing out all the diviner qualities in human nature, until we know but little of true manhood and womanhood, of the latter comparatively nothing, for it has scarce been recognized as a power until within the last century. Let's pause here and annotate some. So at the beginning over here, this first sentence, we're learning that the male element has held high carnival thus far. So I guess male domination. Then he goes on to say that has overpowered feminine elements everywhere, crushing out all the diviner qualities in human nature. Sounds like women have the diviner qualities in human nature. Until we know but little of true manhood and womanhood, of the latter comparatively nothing, for it has scarce been recognized as a power until the last century. Okay, so of the latter, which is womanhood, we know nothing of because we haven't been recognizing womanhood as a power until the last century. So we can say here that womanhood is unrecognized as a power. Well, until recently. Let's go on to the next piece of this paragraph, beginning with society. Society is but the reflection of man himself, untempered by woman's thought. The hard iron rule we feel alike in the church, the state, and the home. So here we're learning that society is a reflection of man through and through. And the effects of that are felt in the church, in the state, and at home. Everywhere, basically. So we'll say man is society. Let's keep going. Starting with no need. No one need wonder at the disorganization, at the fragmentary condition of everything, when we remember that man, who represents but half of a complete being, with but half an idea on every subject, has undertaken the absolute control of all sublunary matters. So this region is saying man is total control by man. Alrighty, so we can pick up the reading from line 31. People object to the demands of those whom they choose to call strong-minded because they say the right of suffrage will make the woman masculine. That's an important point. Actually, we should annotate this right here. Here we learn of a major objection to why people are objecting to the vote for women's suffrage. Why? That women will become masculine. That's why people are objecting. And we can read on. That is just the difficulty in which we are involved today. Though disenfranchised, we have few women in the best sense. We have simply so many reflections, varieties, and dilutions of the masculine gender. Another really worthy of note point right here is that women are disenfranchised, but there are very few women in the best sense. So it sounds like women have been diluted to become dilutions of men. Okay, let's go on from the strong. The strong natural characteristics of womanhood are repressed and ignored. Independence. For so long as man feeds woman, she will try to please the giver and adapt herself to his condition. To keep a foothold in society, woman must be as near like man as possible, reflect his ideas, opinions, virtues, motives, prejudices, and vices. So I'm going to write women to survive, copy man. She must respect his statutes, though they strip her of every inalienable right and conflict with that higher law written by the finger of God on her own soul. So she's not copying man willingly. She's sort of being forced to be like man. All right, and then let's read the next paragraph, starting with line 48. Man has been molding woman to his ideas by direct and positive influences, while she, if not a negation, has used indirect means to control him, and in most cases developed the very characteristics both in him and herself that need repression. So but men and women are both influencing one another. And it sounds like the result of both of these two genders influencing one another, they've actually brought out the characteristics that need not be expressed. So it sounds here that there are some negative characteristics that got developed while they were trying to influence each other. So I'm going to write negative characteristics. Let's read on. And now man himself stands appalled at the results of his own excesses and mourns in bitterness the falsehoods, selfishness, and violence are the law of life. So the male gender is not pleased with the negative characteristics that he sees. So we'll say here that male unpleased, and then we'll keep going. The need of this hour is not territory, gold mines, railroads, or specie payments, but a new evangel of womanhood, to exalt purity, virtue, morality, true religion, to lift men up to the higher realms of thought and action. So this is what's currently needed. And these are women's qualities. So since we agreed to stop at line 60, we are going to stop here and let's go ahead and try to answer the questions. So let's read question 33, main idea / big picture topic question. The central problem that Stanton describes in the passage is that women have been, let's go through the choices, denied equal education opportunities, which has kept them from reaching their potential. Nothing about education was mentioned, so it cannot be A. Let's look at B. Prevented from exerting a positive influence on men, which has led to societal breakdown. That was mentioned in good measure, actually, in this passage. So let's leave B open. Let's read the others. C says prevented from voting, which has resulted in poor candidates winning important elections. So C was never said. What about D? Blocked by men from serving as legislators, which has allowed the creation of unjust laws. So D was never said. B is the clear winner here. So let's go to the next question. It's a function question. Stanton uses the phrase high carnival in line 15 mainly to emphasize what she sees as the, if you remember, we write in this region, line 15, the male element has held high carnival thus far. It is fairly run riot from the beginning. And we annotated here that high carnival meant male domination. So we're using the my answer strategy. Now let's go look at the choices, see if there's anything that's going to allude to male domination. Okay, so Stanton uses the phrase high carnival mainly to emphasize what she sees as the choice A, the utter domination of women by men. That's it. That's got to be it because we have already annotated it. It's there. But just to prove it, let's read B, C, and D. Just freewheeling spirit of the age, no. Scandalous decline in moral values, no. Growing power of women in society, that's definitely not happening just yet. So A would be it. Let's go to question 35. It's a detail / little picture question, and it reads, Stanton claims that which of the following was a relatively recent historical development? Relatively recent. That was actually mentioned in the first column near the middle, where we knew that women have not been recognized until recently, is what it said. Something to that effect, right here. So from lines 20, womanhood of the latter comparatively nothing, for it has scarce been recognized as a power until within the last century. Speaking of womanhood, womanhood has only been recognized recently. That's the only place where they mentioned recent historical development. Let's go ahead and look at the choices, see if any of that is mentioned in there. So, relatively recent historical development. The control of society by men. No, the control of society by men has been happening for ages. It's said in the first paragraph. The spread of war and injustice, that has been happening for ages, as mentioned in the first paragraph. The domination of domestic life by men. Nope, has been happening forever, as stated in the first paragraph once again. So it's got to be D. The acknowledgement of women's true character is a fairly recent development. And yes, we found that right in this region. So let's go to the next question, question 36. Which choice provides the best evidence to the previous question? So thankfully, we already annotated this. And you can see clearly the little region that give us that answer started right here. Like the choices are 3 through 7, so we know 3 through 7 cannot make sense. 15 through 22 is part of that, so it's actually maybe that one. Yes, because right here, womanhood of the latter comparatively nothing, for it has scarce been recognized. Yes, so it's got to be B. That's where we found that sentence. So 36 is B. Let's move on to the next question. 37 is a vocabulary question. As used in line 24, rule most nearly means what? So let's go to line 24, starting with maybe society is but the reflection of man himself, untempered by woman's thought. The hard iron rule we feel alike in the church, the state, and the home. So we annotated here and said that man is a reflection of society, and the effects of man and his governance are being felt everywhere in the church, the state, and even the home. So from the woman's perspective, because this passage is being given by a woman, from her perspective, the rule is being used to establish what? So let's go through the choices. As a general guideline? Nope. A controlling force? That could be, because men have been painted as being very controlling and influential in a negative way towards women, so could be B. C, an established habit. No, it's not about habits. A procedure or method? No, so it's got to be B. All right, next question is an inference question. It can reasonably be inferred that the strong-minded, line 32, was a term generally intended to do what? So in context, calling a woman strong-minded back in these olden days was not really a compliment. So with that, let's go ahead and find it in line 32, starting with line 31. So people object to the demands of those whom they choose to call strong-minded. So you can already see that people who are referred to as strong-minded are objected. We actually wrote here, objection. Why were they being objected? Because women who are termed as being strong-minded were feared that they would become masculine. So strong-minded was definitely not a compliment back in those days. So yeah, let's try and see which of these choices is going to agree with that. It can reasonably be inferred that the strong-minded, line 32, was a term generally intended to, is it A, praise women who fight for their long-denied rights? Definitely not praising women. Or is it B, identify women who demonstrate intellectual skill? No, it's not about intellect. Is it C, criticize women who enter male-dominated professions? It could very well be C, so let's keep that open until we read D. Condemn women who agitate for the vote for their sex. So between C and D, they could both be right, and we're down to those 50-50 questions. Remember that in our experience tells us go with the answer that is literally in the passage. There isn't anything about male-dominated professions in here at all. So C is not it. It's got to be D, because women are being condemned for standing up for their rights. So let's go on to the next question, question 39. It's another vocabulary question. As used in line 36, best most nearly means what? So let's read best in context, starting with maybe up here. Though disenfranchised, we have few women in the best sense. We have simply so many reflections, varieties, and dilutions of the masculine gender. So women in the best sense, in their true nature, in their truest nature, is what that best sense means. So let's look at the choices, see if we can find anything like that. Superior and true nature? Nope. Doesn't make sense. Excellent? Nope. Genuine? Yes, genuine means true nature. So it's got to be C. D is out. Let's go to the next question. It's a detail/little picture. Stanton contends that the situation she describes in the passage has become so dire that even men have begun to do what? So let's look at these choices. I don't feel as though this we can answer with a my answer strategy. So men have begun to lament the problems that they've created. Actually, that was mentioned in the second column, where we saw all the negative characteristics in this region, that men trying to force women to be like him. And then we also learned that women have influenced men indirectly. But then the very next thing that we saw was right here, line 53. And now man himself stands appalled at the results of his own excesses and mourns in bitterness that falsehoods, selfishness, and violence are the law of life. So the situation is so dire that Men have began to lament the problems that they've created. A could be it. So let's look at all the other ones, see if they make any sense. So we'll leave A open for now. Join the call for women's suffrage. Nope, that was not said. Consider women their social equals. Definitely not yet. And ask women how to improve their civic life. D does not make any sense, so it's definitely got to be A. So let's keep going. We're very near, if you just notice, we're very close to where we stopped reading. And as you can see, these questions are very chronological. They appear in the same order as they are talked about in this passage. So since we are almost at the end of where we read, I'm guessing the next question might involve us reading the remainder of this passage, starting at line 61, ending at 85. But let's go ahead and take a look at this next question. Question 41 is an evidence question. So let's read it. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? Oh, great. So we actually just annotated that. And we saw that the place where man is lamenting because of what he's done is line 53. So that makes B the answer. And again, please notice the importance and the effectiveness of annotating. So 41 is B. Let's try the next question. It's a detail / little picture question. It says, the sixth paragraph, line 67 to 68, is primarily concerned with establishing a contrast between what? And now we see that we haven't read 67 through 78. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back and answer this question. Now, keep in mind that we've read this question, so we know that they're asking primarily, what is the purpose of this sixth paragraph? It's establishing a contrast between what? So we're actually starting here up until here. We ask women's enfranchisement as the first step towards the recognition of that essential element in government that can only secure the health, strength, and prosperity of the nation. Whatever is done to lift woman to her true position will help to usher in a new day of peace and perfection for the race. So here we see a case being made for equality because it would yield in all these positive things for a race, not just for women, for everyone. All right, so let's go on. In speaking of the masculine element, I do not wish to be understood to say that all men are hard, selfish, and brutal. For many of the most beautiful spirits the world has known have been clothed with manhood. So here we're seeing the narrator / author speaking and saying, you know what, not all men are bad. Some of the best people in the world have been men, is what she's saying. And then she goes on to say, but I refer to those characteristics, though often marked in woman, that distinguish what is called the stronger sex. For example, the love of acquisition and conquest, the very pioneers of civilization. When expended on the earth, the sea, the elements, the riches and forces of nature are powers of destruction. When used to subjugate one man to another, or to sacrifice nations to ambition. So the very qualities that can be used for good have been used for evil. That's the argument that is being made here. And she goes on to say that when those characteristics are expended on the earth, the sea, and the elements, the riches and the forces of nature are powers of destruction. Yes, when used incorrectly, they become powers of destruction. And when they're used to subjugate one man to another, or to sacrifice nation to ambition, they're used in a negative way. So it sounds like this region, from 61 all the way to 78, is talking about qualities of men and how equality would be great for everyone, not just women, for the whole race. So let's go back to question 42 and see if we can answer this. The sixth paragraph, lines 67 through 78. So to be precise, we are looking specifically at this little box right here. This box. So what is it primarily concerned with doing? Is it primarily concerned with establishing a contrast between men and women? Could be. The spiritual world and the material world. So B doesn't make sense. We can eliminate B. Bad men and good men. Could be. And then it goes to D, men and masculine traits. It's an interesting question. So is it between men and women, bad men and good men, or men and masculine traits? So let's read this again. It sounds like at line 71, she says, but I refer to those characteristics, though often marked in woman, that distinguish what is called the stronger sex. So she's referring to characteristics of men. So not so much men and women. It sounds like it's about characteristics. And he goes on to say, if you use those characteristics of acquisition and conquest, there's the hunger to acquire new things and conquer. When those things are used in the wrong way, they become a destruction. So it sounds like this paragraph is mostly about traits and characteristics than it is about men and women. nor is it about bad and good men. So we would have to go with D. Certainly one of those trickier questions. So yeah, D would have to be the right answer to this question. And thankfully, we've been able to answer all the questions in passage number 4 without actually having to read the whole passage. So that sometimes happens. And because you're racing against time, if you're able to do that without having to read the whole passage, then good for you. So great job hanging in there, and I hope you're feeling yourself getting better. And if you're not, it's okay. It's still pretty early on in the course, and the idea here is we're going to equip you with every tool that you need to be able to take on the remaining 8 tests and practice on your own by implementing all these wonderful tools that we are giving you. I guarantee you, if you keep practicing and applying these little nuggets of wisdom that we've shared with you, following our plan and strategies over and over again, this will become second nature. You will feel yourself getting better, and you will have that reflected by a steady increase in your scores. So I look forward to seeing you on the next passage, which will be the last passage of test number 2. I will see you there.